I've been to my cousin Leah's wedding down in Asheville that Saturday. Beautiful ceremony in an old barn, string lights everywhere. Everybody drinking moonshine out of mason jars and dancing till the way mountain people do when they're happy, loose and loud and a little reckless. I stayed later than I should have, laughing with relatives I hadn't seen in years. But by midnight, I knew I had to head home. I lived just outside Abingdon, Virginia, and the fastest way back is the interstate. But it was a Saturday night in fall, football traffic, drunk college kids, state troopers running radar every 10 miles. I wasn't in the mood, so I took the old Forest Service roads instead, the ones that snake along the ridges and drop into the hollers where there's no cell service and hardly any houses. Just pines, stars, and the occasional deer that stares at you like it knows something you don't. It was probably close to 1:30 when I left the reception. I remember the air smelled like wood smoke and wet leaves. My truck was the only vehicle moving on those back roads for the first hour. Just me, the hum of the engine, and whatever playlist I had going, some old Tyler Childers and Calterwall, the kind of music that fits those mountains. I was tired, but not bad tired. The windows were cracked, letting in that sharp October chill, keeping me awake. Around 2 o'clock, I noticed the headlights in my mirror. At first, I didn't think much of it. Another late-night traveler, maybe somebody else avoiding the interstate. But the lights never got closer and never fell back. They just hung there, maybe a quarter mile behind, two little white dots floating in the blackness. The road was curvy as hell, switchbacks every few hundred yards, but those headlights traced every turn perfectly like they were on a rail. I sped up a little. They sped up. I slowed down to 40. They dropped back to match me exactly. No high beams flashing, no horn, no attempt to pass. Just keeping pace. I told myself it was nothing. People drive weird in the mountains sometimes. Maybe it was a local who didn't trust outsiders and wanted to see where I was going. Maybe it was just coincidence. But after 20 miles of this, my stomach started knotting up. There's lonely, and then there's that special kind of lonely you feel on a Forest Service road at 2 in the morning with no bars on your phone and nobody around for 20 miles in any direction. I decided to test it. I slowed way down, 30 miles an hour on a straight stretch. The headlights slowed too. I punched it up to 70. They closed the gap just enough to keep me in sight, then settled back. My mouth went dry. I turned the music off. The only sound was my tires on wet asphalt and my own breathing. That's when I saw the overlook coming up, one of those little gravel pull-offs the Forest Service cut into the hillside, so tourists can take pictures of the valleys. It was empty, just a wooden sign and a guardrail. I flipped my blinker, even though there was nobody to see it, and rolled in slow, gravel crunching under my tires. I stopped near the edge, engine idling, and watched the mirror. The headlights slowed. Then they stopped, maybe 50 yards back, right in the middle of the road. Just sat there. No blinker. No movement. I waited. 1 minute. 2. My heart was thudding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I thought about getting out and waving them past, but something told me not to. Something heavy sat in my gut and whispered, "Do not open that door." After about 5 minutes, the headlights went dark. Not dimmed, not turned away, just off. Like someone flipped a switch. The road behind me went black. I couldn't see the van at all anymore, just the faint outline of trees against the stars. I sat there another 5 minutes, 10, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. Nothing moved. No reverse lights, no dome light if a door opened, nothing. Just silence, so complete I could hear blood rushing in my ears. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I eased back onto the road, half expecting the headlights to snap on the second I moved. They didn't. I drove slow at first, watching the mirror. Still nothing. I picked up speed, 40, 50, 60. The curves came fast and I took them too hot, tires squealing, but I didn't care. I just wanted distance. 10 miles later, I risked a glance in the mirror again. And there they were. Same distance. Same steady pace. Like they'd never stopped at all. I almost ran off the road. My hand was shaking so bad I could barely steer. I started praying out loud, the kind of bargaining prayer you only do when you're a kid scared of the dark. Except I wasn't a kid anymore, and the dark felt alive. I thought about pulling over again, maybe trying to hide in the trees, but the shoulders were narrow and the drop-off steep. If that van boxed me in, I was done. So I drove. 70. 80 on roads that twist like a snake with a broken back. Every time I crested a ridge, I prayed the headlights would be gone. Every time I dropped into the next holler, they were still there, patient, relentless, keeping perfect time with me. I passed a couple of Forest Service gates, the kind they close in winter, but they were open and empty. No help there. No houses, no stores, not even a goddamn camping sign. Just me, the truck, and that white van sliding through the dark like a shark. I don't know how long it went on. Hours, maybe. Time got weird. The dashboard clock said 2:47 when I first noticed the lights. Next time I looked, it was 4:12, and I was still deep in the mountains. My gas gauge was dipping toward empty, and I started doing the math. How many miles I had left, how far it was to the Virginia line where the roads open up, and there's at least a chance of another car. I crested one last ridge and saw it. The Welcome to Virginia sign, the little green reflector glowing in my headlights like a promise. Beyond it, the trees thinned, and I could see distant porch lights from farms down in the valley. Civilization. Safety. I almost cried. I punched it one last time, flying down the grade toward the state line. The headlights kept pace right to the border, and then they were gone. Not faded into distance. Gone. Like they hit an invisible wall and vanished. I checked the mirror every 2 seconds for the next 20 miles. Nothing. No van. No lights. Just the empty road unrolling behind me under a sky starting to pale in the east. I pulled into the first gas station I saw in Virginia. Some little Exxon with one pump and a sleepy clerk who looked at me like I was a ghost. I sat in my truck for a long time, doors locked, watching the road. I'd just come down. Dawn came slow and pink over the ridges. No white van ever appeared. I still take those forest roads sometimes. Cheaper on gas, quieter, prettier in daylight, but never at night. And every single time I crest a hill or round a blind curve, my eyes go straight to the mirror. I know it's stupid. I know it's been 3 years, but I can't help it. Because sometimes, just sometimes, when the moon is low and the pines are thick and there's no one else around, I catch a glimpse of 2 little white dots floating way back there in the dark. And they always keep perfect pace. I was coming back from Knoxville that night, hauling a load of antique furniture I'd bought at an estate sale in Fountain City. It was late October, the kind of cold that sneaks under your jacket and sits on your chest. I promised my wife I'd be home before midnight, but the sale ran long and I didn't pull out until almost 9. The interstate was clogged with construction, orange barrels, and flashing arrows for 20 miles, so when my phone buzzed and the GPS voice said, "In 1 mile, turn right on an Old Mill Trace for a faster route," I didn't even think twice. I'd lived in East Tennessee my whole life and never heard of Old Mill Trace, but the map showed it shaving 40 minutes off the trip. 40 minutes meant getting home while my little girl was still awake, so I took the exit. The turn was easy to miss, just a narrow gravel track dropping off the highway between 2 walls of pines. A rusted brown sign leaned sideways that read Old Mill Trace. An O outlet, but the GPS insisted. I eased my truck onto it, tires crunching over washed-out limestone. The headlights picked up nothing but tunnel walls of laurel and kudzu, the kind of growth that looks soft until you hit it at speed and it tears your mirror off. 10 minutes in, the signal bars on my phone flatlined. That happens out here, I told myself. No big deal. The road kept going, so I kept going. That's when things started feeling wrong. The gravel thinned to dirt, then to 2 ruts with grass growing down the middle. Branches scraped the roof like fingernails. I slowed to 20, then 15. My high beams lit up the same scene over and over. Rhododendron thickets, wet leaf plastered to the windshield, the occasional flash of a deer's eyes before it bolted. Then I saw the mile marker, a yellow diamond on a rotted post. Mile 7. Faded, peeling but legible. I remember thinking, 7 miles and already? That can't be right. I'd only been on this road maybe 12 minutes. I kept driving. The ruts got deeper, muddier. My truck fishtailed a little, but the all-terrains held. Another mile or so, and there it was again, mile 7. Same post, same peeling paint, same angle leaning into the ditch. I slowed to a crawl. Had I looped somehow? No, the road was straight as a rifle barrel. I told myself it was an old marker they never took down. Happens all the time on these forest roads. I pressed on. Half a mile later, mile 7 again. This time I stopped. I put the truck in park and stared at it. The post looked identical, same moss on the north side, same vine curled around the bottom like a snake. My stomach did a slow roll. I checked the odometer. 14.3 miles since the turnoff. I leaned out the window and shined my flashlight back the way I'd come. Just ruts and darkness swallowing the beam 20 feet behind me. No other markers. No turn-offs. Nothing. I should have turned around right then. But the road was so narrow I wasn't sure I could. And part of me, the stubborn part, wanted to see mile 8 just to prove I wasn't losing my mind. So I crept forward. Another half mile. Mile 7. Again. I started counting them like rosary beads. Every quarter, half mile, there was same damn marker, same damn number. My odometer kept climbing. 18 miles, 22, 27, but the forest never changed. Same trees, same kudzu, same wet leaves blowing across the hood. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath inside the cab. Around what felt like the 15th mile 7, I lost it. I slammed the brakes, threw the truck in reverse, and tried to back out. The rear camera showed nothing but black. The road behind me had vanished. Where there should have been twin ruts stretching back the way I came, there was only a solid wall of kudzu, so thick it looked like a green curtain. Vines hung in loops, dripping with dew, moving slightly even though there wasn't any wind. I got out, stupid, I know, and walked back 20, 30 yards with my flashlight. The kudzu was chest high, woven tight as chicken wire. I pushed through it and my hand came away wet and cold. There was no road, no tire tracks, nothing but earth and roots and that heavy vegetable smell that makes you think of graves. I stood there a long time, heart hammering so hard my vision pulsed. Then I heard it. Water. Not loud, just a steady whisper like a creek running close by. Except there'd been no creek this whole time. I turned the flashlight toward the sound, and the beam landed on another yellow marker half buried in leaves. Mile 7 again. Only this one was facing the wrong way, pointing deeper into the woods instead of back toward the highway. I got back in the truck fast, locked the doors even though I knew how stupid that was, and pulled forward. Only choice left. The headlights shook over more ruts, more kudzu tunnels. My dash clock read 11:47 when I turned off the highway. Now, it was after 2, and the sky through the windshield was still black as pitch. No moon, no stars, just low clouds pressing down like a lid. I drove until the gas needle kissed the red, praying for a widening, a house, anything. The mile 7 markers kept coming. I stopped counting after 30. At some point, I started talking to myself, then to God, then to my wife like she could hear me. Told her I was sorry, told her to kiss our daughter for me. My voice sounded small inside the cab, swallowed by the engine noise and the scratching branches. The air got heavier, almost sweet-rotten, like vegetation left too long in a closed room. My skin prickled the way it does when you walk past an old cemetery and feel eyes on your back of your neck. I don't know how long I drove like that. Hours, maybe the whole night. Time stretched the way taffy does when you pull it slow. My phone was a dead brick. The radio scanned and found only faint gospel stations singing in languages I didn't recognize. At one point, I thought I saw a light up ahead, a single porch bulb swaying on a wire. I sped up, heart leaping, but when I got there, it was just another mile 7 marker with a broken reflector glowing red in my headlights like an animal eye. Eventually, the exhaustion hit so hard, I almost nodded off at the wheel. I slapped myself awake, drank the last of the cold coffee in my thermos, anything to stay alert. And then, without warning, the trees opened up. The ruts smoothed into cracked, but honest-to-God asphalt. My headlights swept across a green interstate sign, I-81 2 miles. I blinked twice, sure I was hallucinating, but the sign stayed. I floored it. The truck rattled and groaned, but we shot forward like the road itself was pushing me. The kudzu walls fell away. Real stars appeared overhead. My phone buzzed alive with missed calls and texts from my wife asking where I was. I hit the on-ramp doing 80 and merged into early morning traffic like I'd just woken from a nightmare. The clock on the dash read 6:08 a.m. I'd lost over 6 hours. When I got home, my wife cried and held me like I'd come back from the dead. She said I looked 10 years older. I still had leaves and red clay mud smeared across my jeans, even though I hadn't once gotten out except that one time. Later, I pulled the SD card from my dash cam. Every clip from the moment I turned on an old mill trace until I hit the interstate was nothing but gray static, like the camera had been pointed at a snowstorm. No sound, but a low humming that raised the hair on my arms when I played it back. I deleted the files, but sometimes when I'm alone in the truck, I swear I still hear that hum underneath the engine noise. I looked up Old Mill Trace on every map I could find. Nothing. No record of it ever existing. The exit I took isn't even numbered the same anymore. They changed it 2 years ago. I drive that stretch of highway twice a week for work now. Always in daylight. Always on the interstate. But every single time I pass the mile marker 107 on I-81, I feel the truck pull a little to the right like it remembers. And sometimes, when the fog rolls thick down off the mountains and the kazoo glows silver in my headlights, I catch a glimpse of a rusted brown sign half hidden in the weeds. It still says Old Mill Trace. I never slowed down. It was the fall of 2019, the week the leaves turned that blood-red color you only get in the Smokies when the nights start biting hard. I'd spent the day in Gatlinburg with my sister, doing the tourist thing we swore we'd never do. Fudge shops, moonshine tastings, all of it. But we were laughing like kids again, and it felt good. She flew out the next morning, so I dropped her at the airport in Knoxville around dusk and started the long drive home to Wise County, Virginia. I could have taken the interstate, but I-40 was a parking lot and I was bone tired, so I cut over to the old Cherahalla Skyway instead. Fewer cars, better scenery, and if I kept the windows down, the cold air would keep me awake. The Skyway climbs high, real high, up where the hollers drop away, so steep you can't see the bottom. By 9 o'clock, I was the only set of headlights for miles. Fog started rolling in off the ridges, thick as wood smoke, and the temperature dropped fast enough that frost feathered the inside corners of my windshield. I've been driving maybe 2 hours when my legs cramped up bad. There's a little gravel pull-off I always use on that stretch. Just a crescent carved into the hillside with a picnic table nobody ever sits at and a view straight drop on the other side. I eased in, killed the engine, and stepped out to stretch. The silence hit me like a slap. No wind, no crickets, just that heavy mountain quiet that makes your ears ring. I was leaning against the hood, rolling my shoulders when I heard the leaves rustle on the uphill side. Soft, deliberate steps. I figured deer, maybe a bear, and reached back inside for the flashlight I keep in the door pocket. When I turned, she was already halfway across the clearing. She was barefoot, wearing nothing but a thin white cotton nightgown, the kind my granny used to call a shift. October, 30 degrees, and her feet were black with mud up to the ankles. Her hair hung long and dark and wet-looking, like she'd just come out of a creek. She walked straight toward me, arms loose at her sides, and the fog seemed to part for her. I raised the light, but kept it low, not wanting to blind her. "Ma'am, you okay? You need help." She stopped maybe 10 feet away, close enough that I could see her lips were blue, her skin the color of tallow. And then she spoke, soft as falling ash. "Daniel Caleb Whitaker. My full name. Not Dan. Not Danny. The name on my birth certificate that maybe 5 people on this earth still use." My mouth went so dry I couldn't swallow. She tilted her head, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear, and said, "Can you carry me home? It's not far." She lifted one arm and pointed past my truck, deeper into the woods where the mountain falls away into nothing but black. I've lived in these mountains my whole life. I know how fast hypothermia sets in, how people wander off trails and die 50 yards from a road. But something about her voice made the hair on my neck stand straight up. It wasn't pleading. It was certain, like she already knew what I was going to say. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I can't take you off-road. My truck's 2-wheel drive, and the drop's too steep. But I've got blankets I can call." "I don't need calling," she said. "I just need you to carry me home." She took one step closer. The fog closed behind her like a curtain. "You'll be back this way soon." I don't remember getting back in the truck. I just remember the door locks clicking and my hands shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. She never moved, just stood there in my headlights, smiling the smallest smile, like a mother watching her child leave for the school bus. I threw gravel, pulling out, and didn't touch the brakes until I was 5 miles down the mountain. I told myself it was shock, or drugs, or some poor woman who'd been abused and wandered off from a camper. I kept checking the mirror, half expecting to see her walking down the middle of the road in that nightgown, but there was only fog and my own taillights, glowing red. The rest of the drive should have taken 90 minutes. I made it in 45, flying blind through the curves, radio off, every nerve on fire. I stopped once for gas outside Newport and almost threw up in the bathroom from the adrenaline drop. By the time I crossed the North Carolina line, I'd halfway convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Then the low fuel light came on. I'd filled up in Knoxville. There was no way I should have been that low. But the gauge doesn't lie, and the next station was 30 miles behind me. I cursed, turned the heat off to save gas, and started looking for a place to turn around. That's when I saw the orange barricades and the flashing lights. Landslide ahead, road closed. A trooper waved me down and told me a whole section of the Skyway had come down in the night rain. No way through until late afternoon at the earliest. I had maybe 20 miles of fuel left. The only option was to go back the way I came. The fog was thicker now, the kind that eats headlights and turns the world into gray cotton. Every mile felt like 10. I kept telling myself she'd be gone, rescued, or passed out, or my mind playing tricks. I passed the pull-off sign too fast the first time and had to back up, tires squealing on wet asphalt. When I rolled in, gravel crunching slow, my stomach dropped clean through the floorboard. She was standing in the exact same spot. Same nightgown, same bare feet planted like roots. Same small smile. The fog swirled around her ankles, but never touched her face. I left the engine running this time, headlights pinning her in twin white beams. She raised one hand, palm up, and crooked a finger. Come here. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Could have been seconds, could have been minutes. My breath fogged the windshield. Finally, she dropped her hand and spoke again, loud enough to carry over the engine noise. I'll wait. I slammed the truck in reverse and got out of there, so fast the rear end fishtailed. I drove until the tank coughed and sputtered, praying for a miracle. One came in the shape of a little country store just before the Tennessee line, still open at 3 in the morning because the owner lived in the back. I filled up with shaking hands while he watched me like I was a man who'd seen a ghost. I told him nothing, just paid and left. I haven't driven the Cherahalla since. I take the interstate now, even when it adds 2 hours, even in holiday traffic. But every October, when the leaves bleed red and the fog sits heavy in the valleys, I dream about her. Same dream every time. I'm standing outside my truck in that pull-off, engine cold and dead, and she's walking toward me through the mist saying my name like a lullaby. Some nights I wake up reaching for keys that aren't there. And sometimes when I'm driving other mountain roads and the fog rolls in thick, I'll pass a pull-off and swear I see a figure in white standing just beyond a guardrail. Bare feet, arms at her sides, smiling that small, patient smile, waiting for me to come back that way again. It was late August, the kind of sticky hot night when the mountains hold the day's heat like a grudge. I've been down in Cherokee for the weekend, helping my uncle move out of the trailer he'd lived in since Vietnam. We spent 2 days hauling boxes, drinking warm beer, and listening to him tell the same stories about the war until the words blurred together. By Sunday evening, I was worn thin, sunburned, and ready to be home. I kissed my aunt goodbye, promised I'd call when I got to Johnson City, and pulled out just after dark. The plan was simple. Take 19 up through the reservation, catch the back way along the Raven Fork, then shoot up 441 through the park. Quiet roads, no traffic, and if I kept the windows down, the river air would keep me awake. The first hour was peaceful. Crickets screaming, moon hanging low and orange over the ridges, the smell of water and pine drifting in. I had the radio off. After 2 days of my uncle's television, I just wanted quiet. Somewhere past Ella, I turned onto a stretch locals call Big Cove Road, narrow blacktop that hugs the river on one side and sheer rock on the other. There are no street lights, no houses for miles, just the occasional mailbox leaning like it gave up years ago. My headlights carved a tunnel through the dark. and the only sound was tires humming and the river muttering over rocks. That's when I saw him. He was standing dead center in my lane, maybe 50 yards ahead, small as a fence post. I thought it was a deer at first. They do that, freeze in the lights, but this shape was upright. I eased off the gas and tapped the brakes. 30 yards, 20, and then the headlights found his face. A little boy, couldn't have been more than 7 or 8. Denim overalls with no shirt underneath, barefoot, arms hanging loose. His skin was pale, almost gray in the light, and his hair stuck up in damp cowlicks like he'd been swimming. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just stared straight into the beams like they were sunshine. I slammed the brakes hard. Tires locked, ABS chattered, and the car slid sideways a little before it stopped 10 feet from him. My heart was already in my throat. I laid on the horn, 2 long blasts, expecting him to jump or run or at least cover his ears. He didn't. He tilted his head, slow, like a dog hearing a new sound, and then he walked forward. Not ran, walked, steady and deliberate, until he reached the bumper. I yelled through the glass, "Hey, get out of the road. Where's your mama?" Nothing. No fear, no recognition. Just those wide, dark eyes fixed on me. I shifted into park and reached for my phone to call 911, but there wasn't a single bar. Of course there wasn't. This stretch is a dead zone, even on a good day. Before I could decide what to do, he put one bare foot on the bumper and climbed. Hand, knee, smooth as a cat, like the hood wasn't slick metal but something he belonged on. In 3 seconds, he was crouched in the center, small palms pressed flat against the windshield right in front of my face. The glass fogged under his hands. His mouth started moving, lips forming words I couldn't hear over the idle of the engine. I could see his breath blooming white, even though it was 80 degrees out. I shouted again, louder this time, smacking the steering wheel. He didn't blink. The words kept coming, silent and desperate. I caught the shape of them. "Help me. Please." Over and over. I don't know what I did next. Panic took the wheel. I threw the car into reverse and floored it. Tires spun, caught, and we shot backward down the road. 20 miles an hour, 30, 40. The boy slid, but he didn't fall. His knees bent, fingers splayed wide, and he rode the hood like he was glued there. His hair whipped back, nightgown thin, overall straps flapping, but his face stayed pressed to the glass, mouth still working. "Help me, help me, help me." 50 miles an hour backward on a road I could barely see. I kept one hand on the wheel and one death gripping the oh shit handle, waiting for the curve that would send us into the river. The boy's eyes never left mine. At 60, the wind finally tore him loose. He peeled off the hood slow, almost gentle, like a leaf caught in an updraft, and tumbled into the darkness. I caught one last glimpse of him in the brake lights, small body rolling once, twice, then swallowed by the trees. I slammed the brakes again, chest heaving, staring at the empty road behind me. Nothing moved. No crying, no running footsteps, just the river and the cricket starting up again like nothing had happened. I sat there a long time, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 20, too scared to get out and look. When I finally crept forward, high beams sweeping the shoulder, there was no sign of him. No blood, no overall snagged on a bush, no footprints in the soft dirt. Just wet leaves and moonlight. I drove the rest of the way home, doing 40 in a 65, windows up, doors locked, checking the hood every 30 seconds. When I pulled into my driveway, just before dawn, I sat in the car another 10 minutes before I could make myself look. There they were. 2 perfect child-sized handprints, side by side, burned into the paint like acid etchings. The metal around them was discolored, dull gray rings where the clear coat had blistered and peeled. I tried everything, compound, clay bar, even took it to a body shop in town. The prints wouldn't buff out, wouldn't paint over. They're still there to this day, faded some by weather, but you can see them clear as anything when the light hits right. I went back a week later in broad daylight with a friend who's a tribal police officer out of Cherokee. We walked that stretch of road for 2 hours. No houses within 5 miles. No missing child reports. No footprints. No clothing fibers, nothing. He got real quiet when he saw the hood, just traced one of the prints with his finger, and told me some things in these mountains don't leave tracks. I don't drive Big Cove after dark anymore. I don't even like driving past the turnoff. But sometimes when a moon is low and the river's loud, I'll wake up with my heart racing and the smell of wet leaves in my nose. And for just a second, I'll feel the weight on the hood again, small cold palms pressing against the windshield, mouthing the same two words I never actually heard but somehow still understand. Help me. I never did. And whatever he needed help from, I think it's still looking. The night it happened was the first real cold snap of November, the kind that turns the hollers into chimneys and makes the stars look close enough to touch. I'd spent the day in Roanoke picking up a used chainsaw from a guy on Craigslist. Cash deal, no receipt, the way most things still get done up here. By the time I headed home, it was pushing 9 and the temperature had already dropped into the 20s. I took the back way, Route 311 up through Catawba, then cut over on those little forest roads that wind along the ridges toward Paint Bank. No traffic, no troopers, just me in the pickup and a thermos of coffee gone lukewarm hours ago. I had the radio on low, scanning for something to keep me awake. Usually I just get static that far back, but that night the dial snagged on a weak signal, 88.1 or something, faint and crackly like it was broadcasting from the bottom of a well. Old gospel quartet stuff, the kind my granddaddy used to play on Sunday mornings. I'll fly away, farther along, voices tight and mournful, the way they sang it before everything got polished and pretty. I left it there. The harmony felt right for the dark, like the mountains themselves were humming along. A few miles in, the song faded under a wash of static, and a man's voice came through, low and calm, with that slow mountain drawl you don't hear much anymore. Bear left at the fork ahead. I glanced at the radio. Nothing on the display, but the frequency. I was coming up on a Y in the road I'd driven 100 times. Left goes toward the gap, right climbs the ridge, and dead ends at an old fire tower. I took the left like always. The voice came back almost immediately. Good. Stay in your lane through the next curve. It's sharper than it looks. I laughed out loud, shaky. Somebody's CB bleeding over, I thought. Truckers do that sometimes, play preacher on open channels. I reached to change the station, but the voice kept talking, steady, patient like he could see me. Ease off the gas. Deer on the shoulder. I let off without thinking. Sure enough, 2 does and a spike buck bolted across the road, right in my headlights, gone before I even touched the brake. My skin prickled. Coincidence. Had to be. I turned the volume knob all the way down. The voice got quieter, but didn't stop. Half mile. Start watching for the drop-off on your right. I killed the radio completely. Dead silence, except the tires and the wind in the cracks around the doors. I told myself that was that. Just some bored ham operator with a big antenna and too much time. I took a long pull of cold coffee and tried to shake the feeling that somebody was riding shotgun. 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. I'd had it on airplane mode since Catawba. No service, battery saving. I glanced down. The screen was lit up with a music app open, even though I hadn't touched it in hours. The same gospel song from the radio was playing, tinny through the phone speaker. Then the man's voice, same slow cadence, clear as if he were sitting beside me. Slow down now. You're doing fine. I almost dropped the phone. I stabbed the power button, held it until the screen went black, then yanked the battery out for good measure. The cab went dark and quiet again. My pulse hammered in my ears. I rolled the window down an inch. The cold air felt good, real, something I could trust. The voice came back anyway, softer now, almost conversational, like it was coming from the air itself. There's a big curve coming. Hug the inside. And whatever you do, don't stop till you're past the hemlock stand. I shouted into the empty truck, "Leave me alone." My voice cracked like a kid's. Nothing answered except the wind. I floored it, trying to outrun the sound that wasn't sound. The road narrowed, trees crowding close, branches scraping the roof like fingernails. My headlights swept across mile after mile of nothing but black trunks and moonlight on frosted leaves. Then the voice again, gentle but firm. "Pull over right here. Kill the engine and wait." I didn't. I punched the gas harder, tires chirping on the frost. The road dipped and twisted, and I took the next curve too hot, gravel pinging the wheel wells. I was doing close to 70 when the headlights caught the reflectors, dozens of them, orange diamonds flashing in a frantic line across both lanes. I stood on the brake pedal. The truck fishtailed, ABS stuttering, and slid to a stop maybe 15 feet from the rear end of an overturned logging truck. It was on its side, logs spilled everywhere like pickup sticks, cab crumpled against the guardrail. Diesel and pine sap stank in the air. The driver was still inside, slumped against the door, blood black on the window in the moonlight. State troopers hadn't even arrived yet. I found out later the wreck had happened less than 10 minutes earlier. If I'd been 5 minutes faster, maybe less, I would have come around that blind curve doing 70 and plowed straight into the trailer. I sat there shaking, hazards blinking, watching steam curl from under my hood. The silence after the skid was total. No voice, no gospel music, just my own ragged breathing and the tick of cooling metal. I don't know how long I stayed before the first responder showed up. Long enough for the cold worked its way in my bones. When the trooper asked if I was okay, I almost told him everything. Instead, I just nodded, gave my statement, let them breathalyze me even though I hadn't touched a drop. They said I was lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I still have the truck still. The phone, too, though I replaced the battery and factory reset it twice. Sometimes when I'm driving those same back roads late at night and the cab gets real quiet, the radio will click itself on, no matter what station I left it on, and that weak 88.1 signal will drift in under the static. Just a few notes of a hymn, a few words of that slow, kind voice. Watch the curve ahead. Mind the ice. You're almost home. I never answer. I just ease off the gas and take the turns a little slower because I learned something that night never left me. Whatever it wasn't trying to hurt me. It was trying to keep me breathing. But I still don't know why it knew my route better than I did. And I still don't know what it wanted me to wait for back there in the dark before the wreck. Sometimes I think maybe the driver of that logging truck heard a different message. Maybe he was told to speed up instead of slow down. And on the nights when the signal comes in strongest, when the frost lies thick and the gospel voices rise sweet and sad, I swear I can hear another sound underneath. Faint, faint crying, like somebody trapped where no help is ever coming. I turn the radio off now the second I hear the first note. But the voice doesn't need the radio anymore. It just waits until the road is empty and the mountains close in, and then it speaks, soft as breath, against my ear. You're doing fine. Keep going. I always do, and I never stop where it tells me to. It was the last Saturday in May, the kind of warm, lazy afternoon when the mountains smell like honeysuckle and creek water, and you feel like you could drive forever. I'd spent the morning in Damascus helping my dad load scrap metal, and instead of jumping straight on 81, I decided to take the long way home through the Jefferson National Forest. I've always loved those little brown Forest Service signs that promise scenic overlooks or historic sites, even when they lead to nothing but a muddy turnaround. That day, I spotted one I'd never noticed before, half hidden under a curtain of kudzu. Laurel Fork Trail, 9 miles. The arrow pointed down a narrow paved spur that disappeared into the green. 9 miles sounded perfect, just long enough to stretch the afternoon, short enough to be home by supper. I turned without thinking twice. The pavement was surprisingly smooth for the first mile or two, winding gently downhill between walls of blooming rhododendron. Then, almost like someone flipped a switch, it turned to fresh gravel, then packed dirt, then 2 faint ruts with grass growing tall between them. My phone still showed one flickering bar, so I opened Gaia GPS out of habit. The little blued, that was me sat in the middle of a blank green void. No trail, no road, nothing. I figured the map just hadn't been updated since the last timber sale. Happens all the time back here. I kept going. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. Not peaceful quiet, more like the world holding its breath. Birds stopped singing. Even the wind died. The laurel thickets closed overhead until the sky shrank to a jagged ribbon of blue. Sunlight filtered down in dusty shafts, but it felt thin, like late afternoon light, even though my dash clock said 2:17. The ruts narrowed until branches squealed along both sides of the truck, paint trading with bark. I probably should have turned around then, but the road kept going, and some stubborn part of me wanted to see where it ended. After what felt like 20 minutes, I came to a little clearing where someone had dumped a pile of old signs. I stopped to stretch my legs and poke around. Most were the usual brown metal rectangles, shot full of holes, but one wooden plank caught my eye. Hand-carved letters, weathered almost smooth. You are here. An arrow was burned deep into the wood, pointing straight down at the ground. No mileage, no destination, just that single arrow aimed between my boots like a bad joke. I laughed, took a picture, and got back in the truck. That's when I noticed the silence had gone from quiet to absolute. No insects, no leaves rustling, not even the tick of the engine cooling. Just my own pulse in my ears. I rolled forward again, slower now. The ruts curve around a stand of huge hemlocks, and the light dimmed another shade, like someone turned down the sun. My phone had 0 bars, and the clock was frozen at 2:43. I told myself it was the tree cover. The trail dipped, climbed, dipped again. Every turn looked the same. Laurel tunnels, mossy boulders, the occasional flash of a rusted beer can from the 80s. I started marking my progress by scratching little X's on the map with a pen, but after the 6th X, the paper felt damp and the ink bled into blurry spiders. I don't know how long I drove like that. Talking about soft around the edges. The odometer climbed, but the forest never changed. No creeks, no power line cuts, no distant rooftops, nothing to prove I was still on planet Earth. I began to feel washed the way you do when you're a kid walking past a graveyard at night. Not scared exactly, just aware of something huge and patient standing just outside your peripheral vision. Eventually, the ruts widened into another small clearing, and I saw the sign again. Same plank, same carved letters, same arrow pointing down. You are here. Only this time the wood looked freshly cut, the burn marks black and sharp. I slammed the brakes. My tires left no skid marks. The leaves under them were green and perfect, like the truck weighed nothing at all. That's when the panic finally hit. I threw the truck in reverse and punched it. The engine roared, tires spun, and we shot backward down the trail. Branches whipped the windshield, but I didn't care. I just wanted out. I drove like that for what felt like miles, steering by memory, praying for the main road to appear. When I finally found a wide spot, I whipped the truck around in a sloppy 3-point turn, heart hammering so hard I could taste metal. I looked back the way I'd come. The ruts were gone. In their place lay a carpet of fresh leaves, thick and undisturbed, glowing soft green in the strange half-light. No broken twigs, no mud churned by tires, not even a crushed fern. Just forest floor looking like it hadn't been touched since last fall. I got out on shaky legs and walked back 20, 30 yards. My boot prints were there, deep and clear, right up to the spot where the truck had been parked. Then nothing. The leaves started again, smooth as a putting green, like the truck and I had been lowered from the sky by a string. I stood there a long time, staring at that impossible line where my tracks ended. The air smelled sweet and rotten at the same time, like honeysuckle left too long in a vase. Somewhere far off, a single crow called once and stopped, like it thought better of it. I climbed back in the cab, locked the doors out of pure reflex, and drove forward again. Only choice left. The trail kept going, twisting deeper, the light growing dimmer and greener until it felt like driving through the bottom of a murky pond. I passed the "You Are Here" sign twice more, each time newer than the last, the arrow deeper, the wood bleeding sap that looked black in the gloom. I don't remember deciding to stop marking time by heartbeats instead of minutes. I just know that at some point the canopy broke and real sunlight poured in, harsh and golden and raw. The ruts widened, turned to gravel, then to pavement. I shot out onto a familiar Forest Service road like a cork from a bottle, tires chirping. My phone buzzed alive with missed texts from my wife asking why I wasn't home yet. The dash clock read 6:52 p.m. I'd lost over 4 hours. I pulled over right there on the shoulder and sat with my head on the steering wheel until the shaking stopped. When I finally looked in the rearview mirror, the brown sign for Laurel Fork Trail was still there, bright and clean, arrow pointing cheerfully into the trees. I've driven that same road a dozen times since. The sign is gone. The turnoff is gone. Just a wall of laurel and kudzu where the pavement used to be. Sometimes when I'm riding with my dad and we pass that stretch, I'll slow down and stare into the green until he asks what I'm looking at. I never tell him, but every spring when the rhododendron blooms thick and pink and the air smells too sweet, I'll wake up in the middle of the night with leaves in my mouth and dirt under my fingernails I can't account for. And for just a second, I'll feel the truck rolling slow under those dark tunnels again, headlights carving out that same carved wooden arrow pointing down, down, down into the soft black ground. You are here. I still don't know if I ever really left. It was early December, the week before Christmas, when the high country around Boone turns into a black and white photograph. Bare trees, gray sky, and fog that sits in the valleys like milk in a bowl. I'd spent the day in town doing last-minute shopping for my kids and picking up a part from my wife's dryer. By the time I headed home, it was pushing 10, and the temperature had fallen into the teens. The roads were mostly empty. Everybody with sense was already inside by the fire. I took 421 out toward Deep Gap, then cut over on one of those little county roads that locals use to shave 10 minutes off the drive. You know the kind, no center line, no shoulder, just a ribbon of asphalt threading through hollers so tight the fog presses against your windows like it wants in. I noticed the lights about 5 miles after I turned off the highway. 2 of them, low and orange, the color of a dying campfire, floating far back in the rear view. At first I thought they were headlights on low beam, maybe somebody running dark to save their battery. But they never grew brighter and never fell behind. They just hung there, maybe a quarter mile back, tracing every curve exactly the way I did. When the road bent left, they bent left. When it climbed a ridge and dropped, they followed the contour perfect, like they were painted on the fog itself. I sped up a little. They sped up. I slowed to 30. They slowed. No high beams flashing. No attempt to close the gap. Just patient, steady pursuit. I told myself it was nothing, just another driver being polite, keeping their distance. But after 10 miles of that, the skin on the back of my neck started crawling. There's lonely, and then there's the kind of lonely you feel when the fog is so thick you can't see 50 feet, and the only other living soul for miles seems to have chosen you to follow. I decided to test it. I took the next random left onto Bamboo Road, a twisty little snake that climbs up toward the parkway. The orange lights followed, without hesitation, turned behind me. I took a right onto Old Turnpike, then another quick left onto a gravel lane. I knew dead-ended at a church. Every turn, they mirrored me, never gaining, never losing ground. It was like driving with a shadow that had its own headlights. By then, my hands were sweating inside my gloves. I rolled the window down an inch. The cold hit my face like a slap, but it helped me think. I remembered a 24-hour Exxon on the edge of town, one of those bright islands that stays open for truckers and third-shift workers. I punched the address into my phone. No signal, of course, but muscle memory took over. I floored it, taking the curves faster than I should have on wet pavement, tires chirping, praying I didn't meet a deer. The lights stayed with me, calm and constant, like they had all night. I hit the outskirts of Boone doing 80, fog swirling in the headlights like smoke. The Exxon appeared out of nowhere, harsh fluorescent lights cutting through the murk, pumps glowing like a lighthouse. I slid into the lot crooked, slammed the truck in park, and ran inside without even killing the engine. The bell over the door jangled loud in the empty store. The clerk, young kid, maybe 20, with a beard that hadn't decided what it wanted to be, looked up from his phone and frowned. "You all right, man? You're white as a sheet." I tried to explain, words tumbling over each other, something about lights that wouldn't quit following. He listened without interrupting, then walked to the front windows and stared out into the fog. I followed his gaze. There they were, 2 dim orange orbs hovering just past the last pump, right where the parking lot gravel meets the darkness. Not on a road, not pulled in, just floating about headlight height, perfectly still. The kid's face went tight. He reached under the counter, flipped a switch, and every outside light in the place died except the ones over the pumps. Then he locked the deadbolt on the door. "Stay put," he said, voice low. "Don't go back out till the sun's up." I started to ask why, but the look he gave me shut my mouth. He motioned me behind the counter, pulled 2 styrofoam cups, and poured coffee neither of us wanted. We stood there watching those lights for hours. Sometimes they drifted a few feet left or right, but never came closer than the edge of the lit pavement. The fog moved around them like water around stones. Once around 3 a.m., a semi pulled in for diesel, air brakes hissing. The driver never even glanced at the lights. just paid, used the restroom, and left. The orange glow waited until his taillights disappeared, then settled back into the same spot. The kid, Caleb, his name tag said, finally spoke around 4:30. My granddaddy used to call them corpse candles. So they show up when somebody's marked to die, follow you home so they know which house to come collect. He tried to laugh, but came out thin. I always thought he was full of it. Till tonight. I asked if he'd ever seen them before. He shook his head. Not like this. Sometimes folks talk about seeing one light way up on the ridges, leading hunters off trail. But two together, that's new. He glanced at me sideways. You piss anybody off lately? I couldn't answer. My mind kept replaying the drive, every curve, every random turn those lights had matched without fail. I thought about my wife asleep in our bed 15 miles away, kids tucked in with their new pajamas I'd hidden in the closet. I thought about how easy it would be for something to follow me all the way there. We watched until the sky behind the mountains turned the color of weak coffee. The fog thinned just enough to see the tree line. 1 minute the lights were there, steady and patient. The next, they simply weren't. No fade, no movement, just gone like someone flipped a switch. Caleb unlocked the door. Cold, clean air rushed in. They usually leave at first light, he said. You're probably okay now. He wouldn't take my money for the coffee. I drove home slow, checking the mirror every 10 seconds. Nothing followed. The roads were empty, the fog lifting in pale ribbons. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light was still on, same as I'd left it. My wife stirred when I crawled into bed, asked if everything was all right. I told her, yeah, just tired. I didn't sleep. I've avoided that route ever since. I take the long way, add 20 minutes, whatever it takes. But some nights, when the fog sits heavy in the hollers and the ridges disappear, I'll wake up with my heart racing and walk to the window. I tell myself it's just to check the weather. Most times there's nothing but darkness and the glow from the neighbor's barn. But every once in a while, way down at the end of our gravel road where the fog pools thickest, I'll see two dim orange lights waiting at the edge of the trees. Not moving, not coming closer, just watching the house, making sure they still remember the way. It was the middle of January, one of those raw, wind-whipping nights when the coal fields of southern West Virginia feel like the coldest place on earth. I just finished a 12-hour haul out of Bluefield, delivering a load of oak flooring to a contractor in Beckley, and all I wanted was a large coffee and the last 60 miles home to Logan. The only place still open at 1:30 in the morning was a little Sheetz just off the interstate, fluorescent lights buzzing like dying insects, parking lot glazed with frozen slush. I parked nose in beside the pumps, left the engine running so the cab wouldn't turn into an icebox, and went inside. The cashier barely looked up from her phone. I paid for the coffee, nodded at the trooper who was buying cigarettes, and walked back out into the wind. Steam rolled off the cup as I crossed the lot. I grabbed the driver's door handle, pulled it open, and froze. There was a man sitting in my passenger seat. Same build as me, same dark hair curling out from under a black stocking cap, same exact Carhartt jacket I bought at the Tractor Supply the week before Christmas. He was staring straight ahead through the windshield, hands folded in his lap, breath fogging slow and even. I hadn't heard the door open. I hadn't seen anyone walk past me. 1 second the cab was empty, the next he was just there. I stood in the open doorway, wind knifing through my coat, trying to make sense of it. Carjacker? Drunk who wandered into the wrong truck? But the doors had been locked. I'm religious about that on night runs, and the only footprints in the slush were mine. I clear my throat. Hey buddy, this is my rig. You gotta get out. He didn't move, didn't blink, just kept staring at the gas pumps like they held the secrets of the universe. His profile was so close to mine it felt like looking in a mirror that had been left out in the rain too long. Everything familiar but slightly warped, slightly wrong. I stepped back and pulled my phone, thumb hovering over 911. That's when he turned his head, slow, like his neck was stiff from sleeping wrong, and looked straight at me. Same eyes, same tired hazel, bloodshot the way mine get after too much coffee and not enough sleep. He didn't speak, didn't smile, just studied me the way you study your own reflection when you're trying to decide if you like what you see. I hit call. The dispatcher picked up on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency? "There's a man in my truck who won't get out," I said, voice shaking harder than I wanted. "Sheets on Robert C. Bird Beckley. He just sitting there." The trooper I'd seen inside must have heard me through the open door because he stepped out, hand resting easy on his holster, and started across the lot. I kept the phone to my ear, eyes locked on the stranger. He watched the trooper approach without interest, then unbuckled the seatbelt I never saw him put on, opened the passenger door, and stepped out into the other side. I thought that was it. Thought he'd walk away into the dark. Instead, he closed the door softly, walked around the hood, slow, deliberate steps, and opened the driver's door I was still holding. I stumbled back, almost dropped the phone. He slid behind the wheel like he belonged to him, pulled the door shut, and sat there. Engine still running, wipers still sweeping slow arcs across the windshield. He rested both hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, exactly the way I do. I shouted at him through the glass. He didn't react. The dispatcher was asking questions I couldn't answer. The trooper jogged up, flashlight out, banging on the window with his knuckles. "Sir, step out of the vehicle." Nothing. The man just stared straight ahead. Same calm expression, same slight tilt to the head I catch myself doing when I'm tired. The trooper tried the door locked. He looked at me, confused. I held up my keys, the ones still in my hand, the ones that had never left my pocket. The next 30 seconds felt like 30 minutes. The trooper drew his sidearm, shouted again. I stood there useless, coffee gone cold on the ground where I dropped it. Then the man reached down, shifted the truck into drive, and eased forward a foot, tires crunching over frozen slush. The trooper yelled for him to stop. He didn't. He just rolled forward slow, turned the wheel, and pulled around the pumps like he was leaving. I ran after him, banging on the window, screaming for him to stop. He never looked at me. The truck rolled out of the lit lot and into the dark, taillights glowing red, then disappearing into the fog that hung over the 4-lane. The trooper called it in, plates, description, the whole thing. We stood there waiting for another unit, breath fogging in the cold. I kept expecting to see my own headlights coming back, but the road stayed empty. 10 minutes later, a second cruiser pulled in, lights flashing. They asked if I wanted to file a report for stolen vehicle. I almost laughed. Then I looked past into my truck. It was parked exactly where I'd left it, nose in beside the pump, engine idling soft and steady. Driver's door still open. The trooper and I walked over slow, weapons drawn. The cab was empty, but there, folded neat as you please on the passenger seat, was my Carhartt jacket, the one I was still wearing. Same coffee stain on the left cuff from breakfast, same fray at the zipper where my keys always catch. I reached in with shaking fingers and touched it. Still warm. The trooper shined his light across the seats, floorboards under the truck. No footprints leading away except mine and his. No moisture on the passenger window where a man's breath should have fogged it. No sign anyone had ever been inside except me. They ran my plates, ran my license, asked if I'd been drinking. I passed the breathalyzer. They asked if I was on any medications. I told them only thing wrong with me was I was scared half to death. Eventually, they let me go with a warning to get some rest. One of them followed me the first 10 miles to make sure I got on the interstate okay. I drove home with the rest of the night with the heat cranked and every light in the cab on. Didn't stop again until I pulled in my own driveway at dawn. I left the truck running and walked 3 times around it with a flashlight. No extra set of prints in the frost. No warmth on the passenger seat. Just that second jacket was gone, like it had never been there. I still have the truck. Still drive those same roads when the load takes me that way. But never stop at that Sheetz anymore. And every time I pass it, even in broad daylight, I check the passenger seat. Most times it's empty. But sometimes when the fog sits low and the pumps glow sickly yellow through the mist, I'll catch a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye. A shadow settling into the seat beside me. Hands at 10 and 2, staring straight ahead. Where are my face? Where are my coat? Waiting for me to blink first. I always keep driving, and I never look over long enough to see if he's still there when I look back. I've driven that stretch of Forest Service Road 17 every Tuesday and Friday for 6 years, ever since my mama got sick and moved in with my sister near Whitetop. 31 miles of twisting blacktop that climbs the backside of Iron Mountain, drops into the Laurel Hells along the South Fork. then climbs again until you pop out on Route 58. I know every pothole, every guardrail that's been hit by logging trucks, every place the creek undercuts the shoulder after a hard rain. I could drive it blindfolded, and sometimes in the fog it feels like I do. That Tuesday started normal enough. Cold October dawn, frost on the pumpkin, coffee in a thermos, and the heater in my old Tacoma rattling like loose teeth. I kissed my wife goodbye, told her I'd be back before dark, and pulled out at 6:30 sharp. The first half of the drive was textbook. Sun coming up red over Whitetop Bald, crows cawing in the pines, the smell of wood smoke drifting from chimneys you can't see from the road. I passed the little white church at Green Cove, the place where the road narrows and the guardrails bent from when Tommy Johnson rolled his Jeep back in 19, the wide spot where I always wave at Old Man Miller when he's feeding his goats. Everything exactly where it was supposed to be. Then, right around the spot where the creek crosses under the road the third time, everything just stopped being familiar. It wasn't sudden. No fog bank, no storm, no bright light. 1 minute, I was humming along with the radio, thinking about what Mama wanted from the Dollar General, and the next minute the world went quiet. The radio cut to static, the crows were gone. Even the sound of my tires felt muffled. I looked up, and the trees were still there, but they were wrong. Too tall, too straight, trunks black and smooth like they'd been burned and healed over. The pavement under my wheels looked brand new, glossy black with perfect yellow lines, like it had been poured yesterday. No cracks, no patches, no gravel on the shoulders. Just clean, perfect road stretching ahead under a sky the color of tarnished silver. I slowed down, confused. I'd never seen this stretch look so good. They hadn't repaved this road since Clinton was president. I checked my odometer, 18.4 miles, exactly where the big S-curve should be that drops you down toward Conorock. But there was no curve. The road ran straight as a ruler, disappearing between walls of mountain laurel, so thick the branches met overhead and turned the world green and dim. My phone had no service. That wasn't unusual. There's a dead zone around mile 20, but the clock was frozen at 7:12, and the little location dot just spun and spun. I told myself I must have missed a turn, taken a spur I didn't know about. Happens sometimes when they're logging. I kept driving, figuring I'd hit a gate or a turnaround eventually. I drove for 4 hours. For hours on a road that should have taken 45 minutes end to end. The odometer kept climbing. 30 miles, 50, 70, and the forest never changed. Same perfect pavement, same silent laurel tunnels, same silver sky that never got brighter or darker. No deer, no squirrels, no birds. Not even a beer can on the shoulder. The air through the cracked window smelled like wet stone and something sweet underneath, like apples left too long in a cellar. My coffee went cold, then iced over in the cup holder. I passed the same mile marker 3 times. Fess, 17, mile 12. Only each time the numbers looked freshly painted, the metal shiny and new. I started talking to myself after the second hour, then praying, then yelling at God, at the truck, at the road itself. My voice sounded small and wrong, like it was coming from outside the cab. I tried to turn around twice, but every wide spot I remembered was gone. The shoulders had become steep banks of moss and leaves. No room to swing a pickup. The road just kept pulling me forward, gentle but relentless, like a river you don't realize is moving until you look at the banks. At some point, I started crying. Not loud, just quiet tears running down into my beard while I drove. I thought about my wife making supper and wondering where I was. I thought about my sister calling the state police when I never showed. I thought about Mama asking why I didn't come, her voice thin and confused from the oxygen mask. I kept waiting for the road to spit me out somewhere. North Carolina, Tennessee, maybe the damn moon, but it never did. Finally, when the odometer rolled past 120 miles and the gas needle was kissing empty, I found a place wide enough to turn. My hand was shaking so bad it took 3 tries. I pointed the truck back the way I'd come and floored it, tears drying sticky on my cheeks, telling myself I'd rather run out of gas in the middle of nowhere familiar than keep going forward into whatever this was. I drove another 2 hours. Same perfect pavement, same silent trees, same silver sky. The mile markers ran backward now. 12, 11, 10, but the numbers still looked freshly painted. I screamed until my throat bled. I beat the steering wheel until my knuckles split. Nothing changed. Then, without warning, the Laurel opened up and the road spat me out onto Route 58, exactly where I turned off that morning. The sun was low and orange, same as it had been at dawn. My dash clock read 7:14, 2 minutes after it had frozen. The odometer showed 31.2 miles, exactly what it should have if I'd driven straight through without stopping. I pulled over on the shoulder and sat there shaking while real dusk settled purple over the mountains. My phone buzzed alive with missed calls, 27 from my wife, 12 from my sister. When I called home, my wife answered on the first ring and started crying so hard she couldn't talk. She said I'd never shown up, that they'd called the sheriff, that search parties were getting ready to go out at first light. My sister said Mama had been asking for me all day, confused and scared because Tuesday was my day. I looked at the call log. The last outgoing call was me telling my wife I was leaving the house that morning. Nothing after. 12 hours gone, like someone erased them. I drove home slow, windows down, letting the cold mountain air slap me awake. When I walked in the door, my wife held me so tight I couldn't breathe. My little niece kept asking where I'd been hiding. Mama just looked at me with those cloudy eyes and said, "You're late, honey." I never told them the whole truth. How do you explain something like that without sounding crazy? I said I got turned around in the fog, phone died, ran out of gas, and had to walk. They wanted to believe it, so they did. But sometimes, when I'm driving that same stretch of 58 and the light hits just right, I'll see a gap in the trees where the morning sun cuts through in a perfect straight line. And for a heartbeat, I'll smell wet stone and apples rotting in the dark. I'll feel the wheel go slick under my palms and hear the silence rush in like water filling a sinking boat. I never take Road 17 anymore. I go the long way, at an hour each direction, don't care. But every Tuesday and Friday morning when I kiss my wife goodbye, she holds on a little longer. And every time I pass that spot on 58, I check the odometer like it might start climbing again on its own. Because somewhere up there, on a stretch of road that isn't on any map, there's a perfect black ribbon still rolling through the Laurel, waiting for the next set of tires to forget where it's supposed to end. And I'm terrified one of these days I'll look down and realize I'm already on it again, driving toward a place that remembers me even when the world doesn't.